In this first section of the mental status examination, we will learn about affect and mood. My name is Tom Field, and I produced and narrated this training series. Let's look at the overview. We will learn via a scaffolding process. In this section, we learn about affect and mood. In the next section, we learn about thought process and review affect and mood. In the third section, we learn about memory and review affect and mood and thought process, and so on. Included in each section are some embedded guided practice exercises. There is an end of training test at the conclusion of the 8 sections. I encourage you to follow the handout as we progress. You can use scrap paper for guided practice if you'd like. There's also a sheet provided for this. And as we view the video case studies during guided practice, there's going to be occasions when the client does not manifest an element of the mental status examination. In those cases, it is okay to indicate unable to assess. Let's look at affect. Affect is defined as an observable emotional expression, how the client presents to others. Affect has 2 features, range of affect and congruence. Congruence has 2 parts, congruent and incongruent, also known as superficial. Range of affect spans full or broad, which is known as normal or typical, to blunted or flat, which is known as abnormal or atypical. Full or broad affect is described as a full range of expression, again considered typical or normal. Let's look at an example.
It's just been such a blur. We have so much going on at work. It's a lot of pressure, really. We have this safety inspection coming up, so, we're having to get all our files in order because part of that's an audit, and then, checking all the machinery to make sure everything's up to code and making sure everybody's training's up to date. It's just been a lot of work, and frankly, I've just been feeling a little overwhelmed, and the days have been kind of running together.
This client describes feeling overwhelmed at work because of the pressure she's under at this impending safety inspection. Her internal emotional state is one of anxiety, of stress, of worry. And this is manifested in her external expression, her facial expression, for example, of her internal emotional state. For example, at the beginning of the video, the client sighs, shakes her head, raises her eyebrows, then scrunches her eyes, almost wincing when mentioning the safety inspection, and then frowning again when saying, "It's just been a lot of work." And so her external emotional expression is indicative of her internal emotional state. This is known as full or broad affect. Blunted or flat affect, in contrast, is a dulled range of expression. This is an associated symptom of depression, brain injury, and trauma. In contrast to full or broad affect, someone with a blunted or flat affect does not fully outwardly show their internal emotional state in a way that is observable, and so it's hard to know exactly what that person is feeling or experiencing. Let's look at an example.
I lost my job at the hospital. They said I was drinking on the graveyard shift and a bunch of other stuff too.
This person talks about losing their job at the hospital and for drinking on the graveyard shift. And as they speak, we might imagine that they might feel sad, perhaps, at losing their job, perhaps even worried about what the future might bring. But we don't know from looking at this person's observable emotional expression exactly how they do feel about it. The only facial movement we see is some raising of eyebrows, though this has little connection to content. This person's facial muscles barely move, and so it's difficult to know, just from observing him talk, exactly how he feels about losing his job. This is blunted or flat affect. Congruent affect is described as an appropriate emotional expression to the content being discussed. This is considered authentic, genuine, and integrated. Let's look at an example.
I don't even know where to start. I mean, this dog that I've had for so long, you know, so much can happen, and I can just go home at the end of the day, and Lucky's always there, and always, you know, I just don't know how he got out, and there's just nothing worse than, you know, driving home and seeing this dog on the side of the road, and then you realize it's yours, and, you know, I pulled over, and there was just nothing I could do. And I just don't know what I'm going to do now.
This client is obviously upset at losing her dog. She seems to be sad. If you just view the current frame, you can see that her eyebrows are slightly upturned, and the corners of her mouth are turned down. And that sadness in her expressed emotion is consistent with what we would expect from her internal emotional state. We would expect someone who's lost their dog to be sad, perhaps even grieving. And so that consistency between expressed emotion and their internal state, their internal emotional state, is known as congruent affect. This is in contrast to incongruent affect, which is described as an inappropriate emotional expression to the content being discussed. This is considered inauthentic or superficial. Let's watch an example.
So, like, the other night I was driving home, and I you know, just looking forward to being at home, and just driving down the road, and there's my dog dead. I mean, you know, I've been through so much with that dog. I don't know how I'm going to live without that dog.
In contrast to congruent affect, this client's expressed emotion is inconsistent with their internal emotional state. They're describing the same situation, having lost their dog. And we would expect this client to feel some sense of sadness, perhaps even grief. Instead, the client shows us smiles and laughs, and this expressed emotion is inconsistent with what we would expect from their internal emotional state. Indeed, their smiles and their laughter seems a bit forced, and so her affect is incongruent or inconsistent between expressed emotion and her internal emotional state. It's now time for some guided practice. In this first guided practice, you are going to code this client for range of affect, either full or broad, or blunted or flat, and then consider congruence. If the client has a blunted or flat affect, you do not need to code congruence, because it's hard to know whether their internal emotional state is being expressed congruently or not. If they have a full or broad affect, then you do need to indicate the congruence as well.
I was really hoping my daughter would call me today or soon. I haven't heard from her for quite a while, and I'm really missing her.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect. In this example, the client obviously has a blunted or flat affect. We don't see a lot of expressed emotion in their facial features or even in their vocal tone as they speak. And because it's unclear exactly what their internal emotional state is based on their expressed emotion, they have a blunted or flat affect. Let's try another example.
I'm just so pissed off at my boss. I just want to go to his office and just pummel him.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect. In this example, the client has a full or broad affect. They smile, and their smile seems to be a fairly broad smile. And at the same time, they have an incongruent or superficial affect. This person talks about feeling angry at their boss and wanting to pummel him at the same time as they smile, which would be inconsistent with their internal emotional state. And so this client's affect is full or broad and incongruent. Let's try a third example.
I got into it with my mom on the phone the other day, just about the usual stuff we argue about, and this time it was pretty devastating to me.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect. Okay, let's see how you did this time. Similarly to the first guided practice example, this client has a flat or blunted affect, and because of that we cannot assess for congruence, so you would just code here flat or blunted affect. In the example, the client talks about feeling devastated, and her vocal tone does rise slightly, but apart from that, her facial expression does not change at all throughout that clip. In fact, if you played the clip without the sound, it would be very hard to deduce what the client was feeling. Okay, it's time to look at mood. The definition of mood is a subjective emotional state. This is different than expressed emotion. Mood has several facets: range of mood, lability, and then some associated symptoms we're going to look at, which include anhedonia and vegetative signs of depression. Range of mood spans depressed or dysphoric, which is the low end, to elated or euphoric at the high end. Euthymic is considered the middle ground and normal or typical. Either sides of the continuum, either depressed dysphoric or elated euphoric, are considered less typical and in many cases abnormal or atypical. Let's look at euthymic mood. This is described as normal or typical mood, also known as upbeat and happy.
Yeah, losing my job sucks, but I don't know, maybe it's the opportunity that I needed to sort of get up out of bed and make stuff happen.
The client here seems fairly optimistic. They talk about wanting to get out of bed and make stuff happen while smiling, and so their mood seems fairly upbeat, fairly happy. This is known as euthymic. Depressed or dysphoric mood is a down or blue mood. This is often includes decreased energy, and in some people irritability or anxiety can occur. This is common to depression, anxiety, and depressed states of bipolar disorder. As an aside, dysphoric or dysphoria refers more to anxiety or irritability, whereas depression refers more to that sad blue mood. Let's look at an example.
I can't see the point of coming here anymore. I still feel so low all the time.
In this example, the client talks about feeling so low all the time. That content is indicative of a down or blue mood, a depressed mood. In addition, the client says at the beginning, I can't see the point of coming here. And their vocal tone seems slightly irritable. That irritability is another indicator of a more depressed or dysphoric mood. Lastly, the client seems to be looking down as they are talking a lot, and sometimes the act of looking down is also an indicator of a depressed mood. Elated or euphoric mood is described as an up mood. People often feel on top of the world when they're elated. This is associated often with increased energy and common to manic states of bipolar disorder.
So I have to tell you about this. We did this amazing, it was like a relaxation exercise in my yoga class, and it was just so helpful. You get really relaxed, and we do all the deep breathing and stuff. And then we imagine that we're standing on this mountain, and we think of you let all the negative thoughts come to you, and you imagine each one turning into a feather, and then you blow it away. And you, after you do that for a while, then, we kind of get relaxed again. And when you come out of it, you just feel, so much better. You just, let go of all that negative energy, and it's awesome.
As this person describes their experience in a yoga practice exercise or a relaxation exercise, they talk about feeling awesome, and they seem very excited. They seem on top of the world. And that degree of excitement, of enthusiasm, of feeling very, very up, especially the degree of energy to which she expresses this and raises her hands and emphatically tells you just how amazing that experience was, is indicative of elated or euphoric mood. Labile mood is a capricious, unstable, and quickly changing mood. It is common to rapid cycling forms of bipolar disorder in adults and mood disorders in young children. Let's look at an example of labile mood.
I was so excited. I finally got the couch that we were looking at Macy's. It had been on, the price on it was more than $5,000. There was no way that I could afford that. And so finally, we went last weekend, and it was on clearance, and it was less than $3,000, and I just did it. I just bought it, just flat out spent the money. And I was so excited to have the couch. It looks great in the living room. The color's perfect. It blends with the red walls just the way I was hoping it would. And so I'm really excited about it. But, I just thought, I'm not sure now. I'm not sure now if I'm going to be able to pay my electric bill.
As the client is describing their excitement at buying this couch, and then subsequently their concern about paying their electric bill, you can see the change in emotional state occur. At the beginning, the client seems upbeat, excited, and quickly changes to more concerned, perhaps even anxious. The current image that you see on the screen is one of anxiety, with the raised eyebrows and the looking down. And so that change from upbeat to concerned or anxious is a fairly quick change and indicates an unstable and quickly changing mood, known as a labile mood. Anhedonia is described as a lack of interest and withdrawal from regular and pleasurable activities that one used to enjoy. This is an associated symptom of depression. Let's watch an example.
I guess, I used to be really into soccer, but, kind of played on a team and stuff, but I don't really do that anymore. It's a lot of effort, and, I have to get there and talk to people, and it just takes a lot of energy I just don't have anymore. Yeah, I guess I just kind of gave that up. It used to be a really big passion of mine, but yeah, I just don't really feel like it anymore.
In this example, the client talks about how she was interested in soccer, how that used to be a passion, but how she doesn't do that anymore, and how she has lost that passion because it takes too much energy. The content here is most important. The client is sharing that she used to have a passion that she has lost, and it's that content around losing that passion, losing that interest in activities that one used to enjoy, that is an indication of anhedonia, a symptom of depression. Vegetative symptoms are another symptom of depression. These are described as biologically based dysregulations in brain chemistry, for example serotonin. Sleep and appetite changes are most pronounced and most common. Let's look at an example.
Yeah, it's just hard for me. I've been missing a lot of work just because it's hard to get up. I mean, I just feel so tired, and no matter how much I sleep, I just want to sleep more, and I just don't really feel like I have the energy to get up, and it's not like I feel hungry at all. I mean, I just don't really have much appetite right now. I just kind of rather be in bed, and just don't really want to get up and do stuff, and just don't feel like it.
This change in the client's sleep and appetite is an indication of vegetative symptoms of depression. The client mentions the desire to sleep more and having less energy to get out of bed. In addition, they don't have an appetite, and so that loss of appetite and desire for increased sleep are the most pronounced signs of vegetative symptoms of depression. It's time now for some guided practice for both affect and mood. In the first guided practice, and in subsequent as well, you're going to code the video case study for affect, looking at range, full or broad or blunted or flat, and then also for congruence, congruent or incongruent. And remember, if the client has a blunted or flat affect, you do not code congruence. You're also going to code for mood, looking at euthymic, depressed or dysthymic, and elated or euphoric. In addition, you're going to look at lability, anhedonia, and vegetative signs of depression. Regardless of whether lability, anhedonia, and vegetative signs are present, you are always going to code for range of moods. So you're going to choose euthymic, depressed, dysthymic, or elated euphoric. Here comes the first guided practice.
I just get really tired of being around people. I mean, it just takes so much effort, and I'd just rather be by myself.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect and mood. In this video, the client clearly has a flat or blunted affect. It's hard to know exactly what her internal emotional state is. And she talks about wanting to be alone, to isolate from people, which is an associated symptom of depression. And so we would code this as flat or blunted and depressed. We don't code congruence here because she has a flat or blunted affect. In addition, there's no indication of lability, of anhedonia, or of vegetative signs of depression. Okay, time to try your hand at another example.
I haven't been sleeping or eating or doing much of anything.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect and mood. In the second example, the client again has a flat or blunted mood, and they seem depressed with vegetative symptoms. Whenever vegetative symptoms are present, you will code depressed mood. This client talks about how they haven't been eating or sleeping, and that change in eating or sleeping is a sign of vegetative form of depression. And the lack of emotional expression in terms of their facial movements is part of the reason why they're coded as blunted or flat in their affect. Okay, let's review. So today we learnt about affect. We looked at full or broad affect. We also looked at blunted or flat. Both of those were forms of range of affect. And we looked at congruence and looked at both congruent and incongruent types of affect. For mood, we looked at range of mood, which included euthymic, depressed or dysthymic, and elated or euphoric. And we also looked at how quickly mood changes, known as labile or lability, and some associated symptoms of depression, such as anhedonia and vegetative symptoms. This concludes the first section of the mental status examination training.